Welcome to the first episode of Most Bookish. It is my channel where we are going to be talking about books that I love, books that hopefully you will love, or books that I find interesting and hopefully you will find interesting after I tell you exactly why they are interesting. Or maybe you already thought they were and you want to hear somebody talk about stuff you already knew, because sometimes I like that. I don't know. But either way, we won't just be going through straight reviews on this channel. We will be getting to a little more in depth of the story, or the story that contributed to the story, i.e. whatever was going on in the world at that time or going on with the author at that time, and the way that it can now be seen from the lens of X amount of time later, if time has passed, because the world and politics and people and where we are as a society always contributes to an interpretation of a book, and that interpretation can change for the life of the book. There are books that are written 200 years ago that you can look at completely differently today and look at from its time with a different perspective, with a different lens, if you will, from today's point of view versus what was going on then. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, look for us on Instagram or Twitter, which I have had since I don't want to tell you what year, and I have tweeted nary a tweet, but I shall start, I promise. So it may seem a little confusing, or I don't know if you need me to illuminate what I'm talking about with how I'm going to be reviewing books. We're going to get right into my first group, and in general I'm going to be reviewing books that are somehow related to each other in some kind of grouping, usually because they're from the same author, but I'm probably going to deviate from that at some point. I don't know yet. I don't know what the future holds. We're going to find out together. So let's get right in. You like that? Sounded YouTubey, didn't it? Let's get right in. First group of books that I'm going to get into for this video, in case you haven't guessed it yet, the Jurassic Park books written by Michael Crichton. Now, some of you might not even realize that enormous franchise came from a book to begin with. I read these originally when I was in middle school. After it had come out as a movie, I saw the movie first, like everybody else. The wonderment of that movie was incredible when they round the bend and they see the dinosaurs for the first time and the music is going and you're like, oh my God.
There it is. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
It's a dinosaur.
We'll get into the movie stuff in a second. As I was saying, it was originally a book. The first one written by a gentleman named Michael Crichton. The first book comes out in 90. The movie comes out, is crazy, blows people's minds. The second book comes out and the next movie comes out in 97. At that time, I didn't know a lot of people who had read the books, so I didn't really have a lot to compare to. And I didn't realize that the story was dissimilar. Science that people use today for paleontology is computer science. This is not old. This is not, 300 years old. So a lot of it is still new. It's still guessing. You can find bones and you can study them and you can x-ray them and maybe extract some DNA depending on what's left, and make guesses about that, or use that to make guesses along with whatever other bones you found next to those bones. But the reality is we really don't know anything. We don't know how they lived for real, how they interacted with each other in real life back when those dinosaurs existed. What's interesting about the first book, Jurassic Park, is that's really what Michael Crichton gets into. He gets into a lot of speculation about how reliable our science is around paleontology, but also around bioengineering. And at that time, the world of bioengineering was booming. The ability to scientifically create I don't want to say beings because that makes it sound weird, but to scientifically create something in a lab that was going to be a commodity that could be sold, or some kind of technology that was going to further society in some large way, was very new. And there was a lot of conversation around responsibility. There was conversation around cloning, and were we going to create a new race of cloned people? And there was so much fear around that, and it was a real thing. Like, it was talked about in your house. I remember these conversations, the way that climate change and COVID or airborne diseases are talked about today. Like, that was a scary thing at that time, and I don't think that anybody talks about it anymore. But bioengineering is everywhere. You want to get into GMOs and what we've done to the animals that we breed to feed to people. That's a whole other obviously topic, but it was the beginnings of that. And he was saying a lot about, he used the character Ian Malcolm to say a lot about bioengineering and its possible effects on the world. He obviously says it from a dramatic lens, right? They created these dinosaurs. There may be somebody in the world who has never seen the movies or read the books. So, enormous spoiler alert, this story is about people who create dinosaurs, in case you didn't know. It is about people who create dinosaurs using mosquito DNA from a mosquito that had been preserved in amber and that presumably had bitten a dinosaur. In the books, it gets into how far InGen, who is the company that John Hammond owns, how far InGen had gone to find that DNA. They were mining amber across the world for years and years and years, and they were taking pieces of dinosaur bones and splicing together the little bits of DNA that they were finding. It gets really into detail on all the backstory, whereas in the movies, you just kind of ride into this park with all this crazy technology, and they explain it in a few minutes, and they don't really get into the backstory. That's the first departure from the book to the movie, in that in the movie, John Hammond and the InGen people, including Dr. Wu, are well-intentioned, if you will. In the books, they are capitalist, conscienceless cowboys. They don't really care who they take advantage of or what they have to do. They're kind of con men to get these dinosaurs made. They're con men, or they're self-serving and looking out for their own careers and seeing what they can make of themselves. So that is the first departure. And then obviously there are some other differences, because there always are, between books and movies. Ian Malcolm, who is played by Jeff Goldblum in the movies, he's way more charismatic, I would say, in the movies, whereas in the books, he's Crichton's voice. He does a lot of monologuing, which is where you get most of your scientific information from. You would think that you would get it from Sam Neill, who plays Alan Grant, because he is the favorite in the actual movies. But it comes from Ian Malcolm. He's kind of like the source. Alan Grant is, I would say, the past and a bit of the muscle in the books, but he's not primary character, or he is a primary character, but he's not developed. He's not very developed. He doesn't have the background, and you don't end up loving him the way that you love Dr. Grant. And the same goes for Ellie, Laura Dern. You do not, she's not developed in the story. I will say, for the most part, most of the characters in the story are not well-rounded or developed. They are just vehicles for theories and opinions that Crichton has about the use of biotechnology. What might those theories be, or what might his feelings about that be? Let's find out from the first book. My first reference is on page 342 of the paperback novel, if you are following along. Dr. Malcolm, angry as he spends a majority of his time at the park, angry and outraged by what's going on. He is talking to Dr. Wu. This is way after things have started to go to poop. He's telling him, "You create new life forms about which you know nothing at all. Your Dr. Wu does not even know the names of the things he is creating. You create many of them in a very short time. You never learn anything about them, yet you expect them to do your bidding because you made them, and you therefore think you own them. You forget that they are alive, they have an intelligence of their own, and they may not do your bidding, and you forget how little you know about them, how incompetent you are to do the things that you so frivolously call simple. Dear God. He goes on like that actually into the next page, and he starts to break down how irresponsible he thinks they are in a comparison to other disciplines. And when I say how irresponsible he thinks they are, I'm talking about he's talking about scientists at this point in time, that they are so much more concerned with making money off of their discoveries than actually being responsible knowledge finders or knowledge seekers, answer seekers, I guess, because that's kind of how he feels like they were once upon a time before science became money. He's telling them how irresponsible scientists have become with the power that they have. It starts on page 342, the bottom of page 342, and he says, most kinds of power require a substantial sacrifice by whoever wants the power. There is an apprenticeship, a discipline lasting many years. Whatever kind of power you want, president of the company, black belt in karate, spiritual guru, whatever it is you seek, you have to put in the time, the practice, the effort. You must give up a lot to get it. It has to be very important to you. And once you have attained it, it is your power. It can't be given away. It resides in you. It is literally the result of your discipline. Now, what is interesting about this process is that by the time someone has acquired the ability to kill with his bare hands, he's referring to a black belt in karate, he has also matured to the point where he won't use it unwisely. So that kind of power has built-in control. The discipline of getting the power changes you so that you won't abuse it. But scientific power is like inherited wealth, attained without discipline. You read what others have done and you take the next step. You can do it very young. You can make progress very fast. There is no discipline lasting many decades. There is no mastery. Old scientists are ignored. There is no humility before nature. There is only a get-rich-quick, make-a-name-for-yourself fast philosophy. Cheat, lie, falsify, it doesn't matter. Not to you or to your colleagues. No one will criticize you. No one has any standards. They're all trying to do the same thing. To do something big and do it fast. And because you can stand on the shoulders of giants, you can accomplish something quickly. You don't even know exactly what you have done, but already you have reported it, patented it, and sold it. And the buyer will have even less discipline than you. The buyer simply purchases the power like any commodity. The buyer doesn't even conceive that any discipline might be necessary. What I find so fascinating about this, from the lens of today, is that it still kind of applies to science, or it's still not kind of, it does apply to science. It still applies to how much of the technology, it applies to how much of the technology that has been invented that we use today in regards to social media, in regards to computer technology, the way that our world is running at 500 bajillion miles an hour, and we have no idea how all of these sciences, or how all of these things that science has created that we are exposed to, we have no idea how they're going to affect us. Long term, short term, any of it. You start talking about dopamine and how addicted everybody is to social media and watching videos on their phones. We don't know. And is it harmful? I don't know. And it's not saying that it's harmful. It's saying you don't know what the side effects are going to be. Obviously, his opinion from this book is that it's harmful because these animals end up eating a lot of people. And the way that people die is way more violent and vile in some ways than the movie. But even yet and still, the book is about animals. These are animals that have harmed these people because of these people being irresponsible. The movie is about monsters, and very purposely about monsters. All of this expostulating that happens in the book, it is almost completely gone from the movie. Ian Malcolm kind of says some stuff, Alan Grant kind of says some stuff, but it is nowhere near to the specificity because he refers to actual paleontological studies or scientific studies in here. He gets very specific about all of the scientific background that he refers to in here. And that just doesn't exist in the movies, and you don't have time for it, and you don't want to watch somebody stand around just talking the whole movie. Because of that, the story that is depicted in the movie is way more developed as a story, and the characters are way more developed, and you like them more and you get attached to the characters more than you do in the books. It's impossible with all of the monologuing going on for you to become attached to these people, but you find the things that they're saying fascinating, or at least I did. The last two from Jurassic Park is on page 411. The chapter is called Destroying the World. If you know anything about Michael Crichton, or you've done any research about global warming and studies done or things related to global warming, you might have come across him outside of being a novelist. So he has a past, if you will, that is connected to global warming, because he also used these books not just to talk about how science overall is irresponsible, but he specifies kind of the science around evolution and the conversations that were happening about global warming at that time. He gets a little specific towards the end of Jurassic Park. He doesn't really go on very much about it. It's really more about the bioengineering, but he touches on it in the chapter titled Destroying the World. In that chapter, they are talking about, again, this idea that scientists or people in general could somehow control something as complex as another animal or a world or the planet. Like he thinks, and it's clear that he thinks this, but again, he doesn't get into too much detail about it, but it's clear that he thinks that those ideas are preposterous. And through, once again, Ian Malcolm, he says, let me tell you about our planet. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old. There has been life on this planet for nearly that long, 3.8 billion years. The first bacteria, and later, the first multicellular animals, then the first complex creatures in the sea, on the land. Then the great sweeping ages of animals, the amphibians, the dinosaurs, the mammals, each lasting millions upon millions of years. Great dynasties of creatures arising, flourishing, dying away. All this happening against a background of continuous and violent upheaval. Mountain ranges thrust up and eroded away, cometary impacts, volcanic eruptions, oceans rising and falling, whole continents moving. Endless, constant, and violent change. Even today, the greatest geographical feature on the planet comes from two continents colliding, buckling to make the Himalayan mountain range over millions of years. The planet has survived everything in its time. It will certainly survive us. However, while he says that, Hammond says to him, so what are you saying? We shouldn't care about the environment? And he responds, no, of course not. Then what? Malcolm says, let's be clear. The planet is not in jeopardy. We are in jeopardy. We haven't got the power to destroy the planet or to save it, but we might have the power to save ourselves. And this begins the conversation that he continues in The Lost World that turns into a bit of a controversy in the real world. It starts to seem like he is a climate change denier. And because he is a scientist, and because he is a doctor, and because people are people and they like to believe the things that they want to believe, there are a lot of people who are reading his books who are using it as a reason to not believe in climate change either. And it culminates in him testifying in 2005 before a committee of Congress explaining his thoughts on climate change. If you read the books, he says a few times in different ways that he does not believe, he's not saying that climate change is not real. What he is saying is it is not, one, this inherent thing that is happening to the planet. It is tied to our behavior. And then two, he is saying that the science around climate change is problematic. That's specifically really what he focuses on in his congressional hearing. He talks a lot about how in other scientific disciplines, their experiments are subject to a system that is very rigorous that climate change research is not subjected to. He gets into the way that the double-blind system is used in regular scientific experiments, where the people who made the hypothesis have absolutely nothing to do with the people who are running the experiment, and then the people who draw the conclusions from the data in the experiment have absolutely nothing to do with the people who ran the experiment. You can't have any ties whatsoever. If anything ever comes up that you even met each other in passing somewhere, or you were in the same building at the same time, the entire study that could have spanned years and been millions of dollars has to be scrapped and restarted. Those are the measures that are supposed to be followed with other scientific experiments, for instance, in the drug world, etc. He was saying with climate research, that does not exist. And it presents problems because we are basing our decisions as a country. Again, this was to the United States Congress. He was saying that we're basing our decisions as a country about policy, around policy, on these studies that are not being held to the highest standards. At the end, he says that he can see that there is something happening to our planet, and he is worried of the same way everyone else is, and he thinks that it's important for these studies to be carried out in this way so that we can have the correct information. That sounds wonderful. But in his books, he's a little paranoid, or I don't even want to say paranoid. He's a little dismissive or self-aggrandizing or belittling. I guess that's the best word. He's belittling to these other forms of thought. He does it over and over again in The Lost World. And it's just kind of how he talks. It's the way that he's talking. It's not necessarily what he's saying, but the tone, which obviously sounds a little crazy, right? Because you're reading a book, so the tone is like in my head. But it's how he wrote it. So, for instance, at the beginning, this is the very beginning of The Lost World. He says, consider the numbers. On our planet, there are currently 50 million species of plants and animals. We think that is a remarkable diversity, yet it is nothing compared to what has existed before. We estimate that there have been 50 billion species on this planet since life began. That means that for every 1,000 species that ever existed on the planet, only one remains today. Thus, 99.9% of all species that ever lived are extinct, and mass killings account for only 5% of that total. The overwhelming majority of species died one at a time. He goes on in that vein, like the comments about science in general being irresponsible are kind of gone as a whole. The second book takes you to Site B. The second book is a mixture of the second and third movie. So the second movie comes along, and Ian Malcolm, again, played by Goldblum, love him. He comes back as the main character because everybody loved him so much. They're on this site where animals are existing that we didn't know about, and trying to preserve or figure out what's going on that island. A T-Rex escapes and famously is running around California. It was kind of a jump the shark moment, introducing those animals into the real world, broke some kind of third wall. I don't know. It was whack. People didn't really like it. It was missing all the original people that everybody loved. Popularly and culturally, it wasn't it. We did not like number 2. Number 3 comes out. They took a part of The Lost World, the book, for number 2, what they felt was going to work. And when it didn't work, because they added their own craziness about these animals escaping, then that's not in the book. And when the escape doesn't work, they decide, well, maybe let's make it way more like The Lost World, the actual book. And number 3 comes out. They bring back Grant, who everybody loves, and that movie is received way better, or at least critics receive it way better than the rampaging Tyrannosaurus Rex in the city. So in the last page, in the last paragraph of The Lost World, he gets into, I think, the message that he's trying to deliver, which is utopic. Sounds good, but if you're trying to preserve the world for your children to come, I don't know if it's the best route. He's talking to, it's not Ian Malcolm anymore. It's one of the other characters from this book. His name is Thorne, and it actually starts on 4:15. And he's saying that I wouldn't take anything that's being said too seriously, whatever it is that Malcolm is talking about at that time. He says, I wouldn't take anything too seriously. The fact is that theories are just fantasies. and they change. When America was a new country, people believed in something called phlogiston. Phlogiston? I don't even know how you say that. You know what that is? No. Point taken. Well, it doesn't matter because it wasn't real anyway. They also believed that four humors controlled behavior, and they believed that the Earth was only a few thousand years old. Now we believe the Earth is 4 billion years old, and we believe in photons and electrons, and we think human behavior is controlled by things like ego and self-esteem. We think those beliefs are more scientific and better. The person he's talking to says, aren't they? He shrugs. They're still just fantasies. They're not real. Have you ever seen a self-esteem? Can you bring me one on a plate? How about a photon? Can you bring me one of those? The person he's talking to, her name is Kelly. She says, no, but he interrupts her. And you never will, because those things don't exist, no matter how seriously people take them. 100 years from now, people will look back at us and laugh. They'll say, you know what people used to believe? They believed in photons and electrons. Can you imagine anything so silly? They'll have a good laugh because by then there will be newer and better fantasies. And meanwhile, you feel the way the boat moves? That's the sea. That's real. You smell the salt in the air? You feel the sunlight on your skin? That's all real. You see all of us together? That's real. Life is wonderful. It's a gift to be alive, to see the sun and breathe the air. And there isn't really anything else. Now look at that compass and tell me where south is. And that's how he closes it out as they're escaping the island. There are a few things I will say. He was an author that had complicated viewpoints. I think that his conversation about responsibility was ironic because I think he needed to be responsible or to recognize when he was being irresponsible with some of the things he was saying. You can't always hide behind, well, it's fiction, and you can't always hide behind what your intention was. All of the commentary about capitalism and how science is used for money became ironic because of the movies. Those movies, like I said, are not about animals. They're not about science. They are about monsters. They're about scaring you. They're about the thrills. They're about the what ifs. When the movie came back out, or when the movie was rebooted in 2015, it's the park open. People there, like the ultimate fear come alive. Oh my God, what if these monsters existed and the kids were here and what would happen? And it was thrilling to see the park be in its glory, because even though it ended brutally in the first installments, you actually wanted that park to exist. And it's so nostalgic. They have people wearing their original shirts. They have the music in the background. They do it perfectly. That reboot makes something like $600 million, restarts the entire franchise again. There have been 3 more, or in total the reboot is 3 movies. There's been a short spin-off, and they have made well over $1 billion. I'm sure over the years they're gonna hit 2 billion just on the reboot alone. Capitalism at its finest, benefiting off of these originally scientific conversations. And arguably, maybe in certain ways, if you're talking about entertainment value, better than the books. And I don't know if I will ever say that about any other series. I don't know if I felt that about any other series. Reading them now as an adult, I can tell you that the books are really good, but they're a little bit less developed in certain ways than the movies are. Or they're actually a little less developed than some other books that I've read. And because of that, they're getting 3 pandas. What? 3 pandas? What about 5? No, they're getting 3. And you're not gonna argue me out of it. For those of you who don't know what I mean by that, what are 3 pandas? That is my rating system. We're rating by pandas. Why am I rating by pandas? Because I want to. And also because pandas are enormous. They have a lot of weight. They're big things. Imagine, if you will, a Corolla, Toyota Corolla with pandas inside. If you have 1 panda inside of that Corolla, that's a lot of panda. If you had 5 pandas, insanity, insanity. That's how amazing 5 pandas is. I need you to understand the depth of the feeling behind my rating system. So these books get 3 pandas. And really, if the ideas behind them and the level of information that was given with them was not there, I'm not even sure they would have gotten 3. But the fact that they brought this whole new world and this whole new idea, and it spawned all of these amazing other ideas that other creators turned into these other forms of art, you can't take away how meaningful these books have been. The reason why they are 3 instead of 5 or anything higher is really because, again, the story development's not there. The dialogue is lacking. It's a lot of monologuing, like I said, but the character dialogue between each other is very simplistic. If you've tried to write dialogue, if you've done anything like a short story class or a creative writing class, you will understand that dialogue, or at least in my opinion, dialogue is the hardest thing to get right when you're writing your own story. For some reason, it's really hard to write empathetic characters. Our natural written voice comes off as snarky and sarcastic and weird. Like, it is a gift to be able to write really good dialogue, especially for children, in scary situations. And that also happens in movies and TV shows. The kids in these books, especially in Jurassic Park, especially in the first one, I wanted them to be eaten. Especially the smaller girl. Oh, I wanted somebody to eat her. Like, and I think she's like 8. I wanted an 8-year-old to be eaten by a dinosaur. I wanted all the dinosaurs in a 2-mile radius to converge and all eat her together. She was so irritating. But children in states of fear, they impede safety, and they're whiny, and they're all these things that kids can be, but for some reason when they're written, it's like exacerbated times a billion. The best example I have, if anybody saw The Walking Dead, the little boy. Somebody eat him. Zombies, please, all of you eat him at the same time. Please, please. So the kids in this book, we don't like them. The kids in the movie, we like them much better. They did such a better job with those children. But like I said, most of the characters, they're just not real people. They don't feel like real people. You can also tell who's gonna be eaten. There's a clear demarcation between the good guys and the bad guys, and all the bad guys, again, spoiler alert, get eaten as they deserve, but it's a little expected, simplistic in some ways. The idea is phenomenal. The way some of it is written is less than could have been done with that original material. But because he's the one who came up with the idea to begin with, he does get the 3 pandas. And he deserves them, because there are gonna be people out there who don't get a full panda. They might get a quarter panda or half. They're still some of my favorite stories. They're going to stay in my collection forever and ever, and you should read them. You should read them, especially if you are a fan of the movies or a science nerd. This spoke to my science nerd side when I was 12 years old in a science and pre-engineering program. It was part of our class reading. That's where this came from, a teacher, which other books that I will be reviewing came originally from a teacher, because teachers are amazing. Amazing. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up, book friends, please, because we're gonna be book friends forever. I can feel it. And thank you for watching. If you made it this long and didn't get sick of me or want me to be eaten by dinosaurs or zombies, then let's be friends. Show up for the next one. It's gonna be fun. I promise. I promise. Bye, friends.